Our next item of business this afternoon is Stage 3 proceedings on the British Sign Language Scotland Bill.
That was Thursday the 17th of September 2015 in the Chamber of the Scottish Parliament. And this is Committee Room 2, where many of the meetings to discuss the BSL Scotland Bill were held. The Stage 3 debate was the last of 3 debates that took place, and the bill had gone through many amendments since it was first drafted. Some of the changes were made because of evidence like that given by Avril Hepner of the British Deaf Association, here to the Education and Culture Committee.
It's when you look at deaf children in schools across Scotland, there is an awful lot of expenditure on itinerant and visiting teachers of the deaf that can't sign very well, as I've already said, the communication support workers that aren't trained very well and giving ineffectual support. So if we actually strategically employed deaf people to support our deaf students, it would be a lot cheaper than and cost effective and give much better outcomes, which is far more important.
All public meetings and debates about the bill had sign language interpreters. All of them with interpreter can be found on the Scottish Parliament website. On the day of the Stage 3 debate, the public galleries were crowded. Many of them were deaf, waiting eagerly. After discussing some final amendments, Mark Griffin, the mover of the bill, began his opening speech. He thanked all those who had supported the bill, and gave particular thanks to deaf people who had supported the cross-party group on deafness and lobbied their members of the Scottish Parliament.
Now, finally, I would like to thank members of the cross-party group on deafness, many of whom are in the chamber today. This bill marks almost a decade of their hard work. This bill is a fantastic advert for our Parliament in terms of its openness and accessibility. It's a fantastic example of a minority group in our society coming together, forming a cross-party group, setting out its priorities and lobbying members to the point where we have a bill which is here in front of us today because of their dedication. I think it's only right and proper that we show our appreciation and thanks for them.
Members of a Parliament applauding the public gallery, and deaf people at that. An unusual sight. Then Mark Griffin began to explain why the bill was necessary. It may be common knowledge to deaf people, but it was rare to have it spelled out so clearly and knowledgeably in a Parliament.
British Sign Language is the first language and only language of many deaf people in Scotland. BSL is a visual gestural language that uses space and movement. The hands, face and head are used to communicate, and it has a different grammatical structure from English. Across Scotland, BSL is the Indigenous manual language in the same way as English is the Indigenous spoken language. Deaf people who use BSL are part of a recognised cultural and linguistic minority, and unlike people who speak other minority languages, many deaf sign language users can't learn to speak English as they can't hear the language. The aim of my bill has been to encourage the use of BSL in Scottish public life and raise awareness of the language amongst the hearing population, and I'm confident that it's in good shape to achieve these aims.
He made it clear that the main aim of the bill was to improve the lives of deaf people in all areas of life, from education to the health service.
We also heard statistics provided by the Scottish Council on Deafness, who found that 77% of BSL users who had visited hospital couldn't easily communicate with NHS staff. And it's that sense of abandonment and isolation, whether it be in a healthcare situation, in a school, an education situation, that I hope the passing of this legislation will address.
He went on to explain how the bill in its final version now included much more clearly and explicitly deaf-blind people who use BSL.
Firstly, a new section to the bill now means that references to BSL in the bill are in the main both the visual form and the tactile form of the language. Now, when we originally drafted the bill, we took the view that the term BSL covered all forms of BSL, but I was happy to amend the bill to deliver this clarity.
Before the debate, the SNP government had already made it clear it would support the bill. Alistair Allen, the Minister for Scotland's Languages, led the debate for the government.
And to the many in the gallery, can I simply say thank you and welcome to the Scottish Parliament. I had the privilege of meeting with a few of our deaf-blind visitors and deaf-blind visitors just before today's debate, and I know that many of you have campaigned for a British Sign Language Bill for many years, and I recognise that this is a significant day for that community. Too often, perhaps, we talk about BSL users only as recipients of our public services. Instead, I want to pay tribute to the resilience and creativity of the deaf community in Scotland, and I would suggest that we will all benefit, all of us in Scotland, from their contribution to our country and to our economy. The bill before us today requires Scottish ministers to publish a BSL national plan within 2 years of the Act receiving royal assent. Listed authorities, including local authorities and regional NHS boards, will have to publish their own BSL plans a year later. And we will be required to publish a national progress report, which will highlight progress, best practice and areas for improvement across the entire public sector, which subsequent BSL plans will need to address. BSL plans and reports will be published every 6 years, meaning that we will be able to see real progress over time.
The Minister said the BSL National Plan would cover all public bodies with a national remit who are accountable to Scottish ministers. This would make it easier to have a coordinated, strategic approach, and he explained how the government intended to ensure that national and local plans would reflect deaf people's priorities.
So we intend to establish a BSL National Advisory Group which will advise Scottish ministers on the content of the national plan. The group will include a significant proportion of deaf BSL users. The BSL National Advisory Group will draw on the views of the wider deaf and deaf-blind community and will develop a set of priorities to be included in that national plan. We also want to share expertise and resources to help public bodies to improve their understanding of and response to the deaf communities they serve.
One striking feature of the debate was the emphasis MSPs gave to the importance of BSL in education. Some campaigners had complained that specific mention of education was not included in the bill, unlike in a previous consultation in 2010. They said this was a weakness. But time after time, MSPs suggested that education was the #1 priority. Rhoda Grant spoke next for Labour.
Making BSL more accessible will have an impact on school attainment. We've heard before that deaf children have a lower attainment than hearing children, and that's a built-in inequality that we must tackle to ensure that all young people reach their full potential. As people progress through school, language becomes technical, especially in the STEM subjects, where we really need to encourage young people to participate. And to increase attainment, we need to make sure that BSL is available to young people in school, that the signer has adequate knowledge of the subject to translate it back to the pupil in a way that will allow them to attain the same as hearing pupils in the school. And I think it would also be useful if BSL, like other languages, was available as part of the school curriculum, that young people who don't require it to communicate would learn it and be able to communicate with deaf and deafblind people, and indeed enrich their lives through that learning.
Mary Scanlon spoke next for the Conservatives.
The Scottish Conservatives fully support the measures in this bill, and we will be voting 100% for this bill at 5 o'clock tonight. We also support any measures to assist deaf people and their families to communicate effectively.
Mary Scanlon highlighted another area where she hoped the bill would promote BSL in education.
In England, a GSE has been developed in BSL, and it's being piloted in 5 schools and 1 college starting this month. So given the equivalence between GCSE and the national exams, I hope that the Scottish Government will now work with English authorities with a view to bringing BSL into parity with qualifications for other languages.
Dennis Robertson, SNP, talked about when he was service manager for North East Sensory Services.
When we asked staff to come forward to learn BSL, we were absolutely astounded. Every single member of staff came forward. Everyone wanted to embrace that stage 1 acknowledgement on BSL, so they could be at the front line. So if any person who required BSL that came into the services, whether it be in Aberdeen or Murray, came in, they would at least face someone who could acknowledge their language and their wants, their needs, their requirements. And that's all people ask for, Presiding Officer. People in the deaf community just want to be the same as everyone else. They want to be able to communicate and to be understood.
Like a number of other MSPs, Dennis Robertson described how modern technology was making it possible to improve access for deaf BSL users.
Video relay system. Now, the video relay system is there, and initially it was with NHS 24, but it's now been rolled out to all public services with additional funding from the government. This enables people who use BSL to be able to communicate same as anyone else. When they go to if they want to make an appointment with a GP or they go to any other public service, they've got an app on their phone, smart technology, all those things are available.
Cara Hilton, Labour, emphasised the importance of the bill as a necessary step towards equal rights for deaf people. She referred to an issue that deaf people have been raising for many years: the problems created by classifying them as disabled.
The importance of this bill is that it does not treat British Sign Language as an aid of those perceived as being disabled. It gives BSL its correct status as a fully independent and Indigenous language of Scotland with its own culture, grammar and history. And at the bill's heart is the aspiration to drive real change for deaf children, their families and all BSL users in Scotland. Turning to the provisions of the bill, I hope that the requirement for both the Scottish Government and public bodies to draft British Sign Language action plans will ensure increased support for deaf people, particularly for young people and children still in the education system. As the Children's Commissioner Tam Bailey pointed out in his briefing for today's debate, the failure of our education system to fully meet the needs of children who use BSL as their main language is not only a lost opportunity for those children, it's a denial of their basic human rights. So the provision of national and local BSL action plans provides an opportunity for us to set goals and priorities to deal with those issues, to address the attainment gap and prevent deaf children from being left behind by our education system.
Liam MacArthur, Liberal Democrat, emphasised the importance of the national and local authority plans and the role of deaf people on the BSL National Advisory Group.
The content of the plans will be developed over time, but we know from the evidence we received that they will need to prioritise promotion of BSL in education settings, including in early years support, as well as opening up access to healthcare and employment opportunities. It is right that ministers should be required to keep Parliament updated on progress, not as a means of naming and shaming, but to ensure that the bill is actually doing what we intend it to do and identifying, along with the work of the advisory group, potential areas where changes and improvements might need to be made. That advisory group, as I said at stage 1, should be drawn in the main from the BSL community itself.
Stuart Maxwell, SNP, said how much he had learned from meeting deaf people in his constituency.
Now, I'm sure, like others, I was lobbied by deaf and deaf-blind constituents, and I think not only was that a tremendously important part of the process of my understanding the need and the importance of the bill, but it also made very clear to me in a very stark way the difficulties that individual members of the deaf and deaf-blind community face on a daily basis. I'll give you one example. A deaf constituent approached me and attempted to make an appointment to come and see me to talk about both the bill and also issues that he wanted to talk about personally. I could have seen him very quickly that week, in fact. The problem was getting a BSL interpreter to be available on the day that he and I were both available. So instead of being able to meet that constituent within a few days or a week, it took many, many weeks to actually arrange the appointment where 3 people could sit down so that we could actually speak to each other, understand each other, and make sure that that constituent got their points across and that their view was recognised in the work that I was doing in Parliament.
Stuart Maxwell also talked about how another technological innovation, Facebook, had given deaf people greater access.
We in the Education and Culture Committee created a BSL Facebook group, and we invited the BSL community to join and share their views on the bill, posting BSL video clips. The group was extremely well received, and it attracted some 2,400 members who posted simply hundreds of BSL videos and comments relating to the bill. And I think that was a tremendous step forward.
Winding up the debate for the Scottish Conservatives, Mary Scanlon cited the work of a school in her constituency as an example of what deaf children could achieve with the right support in BSL.
Dingwall Academy is rightly proud of their pupils in recent years, and I have to say I saw no limits to their expectations, with one profoundly deaf pupil becoming a maths teacher, another becoming an audiologist, 2 other profoundly deaf pupils now at university, and a 3rd graduated with first-class honours last year, and various other ex-pupils at college in the Highlands. And I think this is what the bill is all about. It's about bringing deaf children on a level footing and giving them the same opportunities and career opportunities as all other children. And sorry. And a hearing pupil who studied BSL and deaf studies at Dingwall has now gone on to be an interpreter, graduating with first-class honours. And so I see no limit, given that deaf children are given the proper support when they need it.
But summing up for Labour, Siobhan McMahon described how poor the education of deaf children was in most parts of Scotland. She linked this directly to the absence of BSL from their education.
Scottish Government figures for 2011-12 show that 36.4% of deaf pupils attained Highers or Advanced Highers, compared to 60.2% of hearing pupils. Scottish Government data also shows that only 26% of deaf school leavers are likely to go on to higher education, compared to 39% of hearing school leavers. We also know from the Grimes report that only 8% of teachers of the deaf can sign. We must address this.
Siobhan McMahon also talked about the problems deaf people face in employment. She quoted a deaf woman she had met called Abigail Matheson.
Abigail said at that time that employers' lack of understanding of communication support, poor deaf awareness, and not knowing about the Access to Work scheme are creating barriers preventing deaf people from having the chance to get into their preferred careers. Abigail also raised the problems deaf people often face at Job Centre Plus, where staff won't always book British Sign Language interpreters or use the correct terminology when talking about the deaf community and their individual communication needs.
Winding up for the Scottish Government, Alistair Allen restated the Government's support for the bill and expressed its firm commitment to promoting BSL in education and throughout Scottish society.
I don't want to pretend, Presiding Officer, for a moment that the existence of legislation of this kind will overnight transform all these situations. But I very much believe it does strengthen the hand of all those who campaign to put those situations right. Presiding Officer, we have made a good start, but it is clear that there is much more that can be done and much that we must do across Scotland to help ensure that in the future we remove the barriers which still in many cases prevent deaf and deaf-blind BSL users from maximising their potential and making their fullest contribution to daily and public life in Scotland. The BSL Scotland Bill sets us firmly on the right path to address this, and I would therefore urge my fellow members from across all the political parties to vote in favour of this bill.
Mark Griffin concluded the debate on his bill. He brought in a personal note that was very important for him.
One of the reasons for my attempting to introduce a British Sign Language bill was personal. Mary Scanlon mentioned that earlier. It was two of my great-grandparents who were deaf-blind. Now, I never met them because they died before I was born, but I was brought up with stories from my mum and from her mum about how they raised their children, the difficulties they faced, how they interacted with their children and grandchildren, how they attempted to access services and carry out everyday activities with a dual sensory impairment that we just take for granted. And when I became an MSP, I joined the cross-party group on deafness, where I heard some of the experiences of the people in that group, and I was sad to learn that almost 3 generations later, people are still experiencing the same difficulties in accessing services, including medical and police, and in educational attainment, and it struck me that the language is still marginalised and misunderstood. Now, I'm under no illusion that this bill is anything other than a starting point.
In summing up, he made the strong case for giving the language used by his great-grandparents and still used by deaf people today the full support of the law.
I think it's important that I state and others have stated that deaf BSL users do not define themselves as disabled. They're intellectually and physically as capable as any member in here, and they resent the fact that they have to define themselves as disabled to access services that we take for granted. We don't go to a foreign country and define ourselves as disabled. This is about people communicating in their own language. Now, we have to recognise that there is a minority in Scotland who use a different language, who have no opportunity to learn the Indigenous spoken language, and it's up to us to address that and adapt to our services accordingly. I hope that this bill will pass. I hope that this bill will achieve that aim, and I commend the British Sign Language Scotland Bill to Parliament today. Thank you.
So a debate that began with MSPs applauding deaf people ended with deaf people in the public gallery applauding MSPs. For the vote, an interpreter joined the presiding officer at the front of the chamber.
The next question is that motion number 14111, in the name of Mark Griffin, on the British Sign Language Scotland Bill be agreed to. Are we all agreed?
Yes.
The motion is therefore agreed to, and the British Sign Language Scotland Bill is passed.
No doubt some of those deaf people cheering in the Scottish Parliament will have applied to become members of the new BSL National Advisory Group. The NAG will have 20 members. 11 will be representatives of the BSL community, 10 deaf and 1 parent of a deaf child. 9 other members will be drawn from public bodies, such as education, health and local authorities. From now on, the work of the NAG will be the key to making sure the BSL Act achieves what deaf people want. But we leave you in the chamber of the Scottish Parliament, on the day when every MSP voted for the British Sign Language Scotland Bill, including Nicola Sturgeon, Scotland's First Minister, and congratulated its mover, Mark Griffin.